Hey, Heidi Ho Hobo. Sorry for the incredibly scuffed intro. I just need to rant and crash out, if you will, because this video was almost ruined because of a very predatory business practice that I basically not fell for, but just this video. This there was a video editor I was trying to use to make this video, and if I wanted to export the video that I spent 2 days editing for free without buying the premium version of the video editor, which you can see right here. This is the one I was using before. Do not use it, especially if you just do not feel like paying for a video editor. Do not. It put a massive, obnoxious watermark right in the middle of the video over the entire thing. And like I said, I'm extremely angry right now. I found a way around it. Do not worry. I just need to crash out about this for like one more minute, then the video can start. I'll put a timestamp if you want. If you need to skip past it, I found a way around it. Everything's fine, but I just need to get this off my chest because of how important this video is for the challenge running community. That entire thing almost ruined like 2 days of editing and several weeks. I'll go as far as say of footage gathering, of like just testing, experimenting, and total analysis. All of it would have been gone because of that. I found a way around it. I used OBS to screen record the video I edited. In this little video editor right here, I used OBS to screen record it. If you see a little thing at where the original video was supposed to start, what the word be a timeline bar, and like you see like my mouse dart off the screen, that is why. It should not be there. I should have been able to export the video, but here we are. So yes, that was the crash out. That, like I said before, to like probably the challenge running friends I have who are watching me crash out right now, who probably the only people who would have the patience to listen to me crash out like this. This video is so important because I genuinely believe that me and Doofus made a discovery as to how the game in its totality works. Now, admittedly, a lot of it is definitely tied to primarily Gilgamesh, but once, the rest of the video goes on and, I explain everything that goes on and how everything works, I genuinely encourage every single one of, like, the challenge running community to try and, like, put the information in this video to use across the entire game. Alright? Alright. That's the crash out over. I'm sorry. Let me move on to the rest of the video. Hello, hi, yes. My name is Unknown. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I hope you stay a while. If you're wondering what it is I do on my channel, well, that can vary, honestly. I do a variety of things from just playing games, but I will admit there's a heavy emphasis on challenge running content for my channel. And for anyone who has been following my channel for a long time, you would know that I have been taken up with one boss in particular, and something I will admit has started to develop into somewhat of an unhealthy obsession. That obsession being a boss by the name of Gilgamesh, hence the name and title of this video. You see, I am very involved in the Final Fantasy VII challenge running community. I'm actually the head of the, to my knowledge, the only existing and only truly successful Final Fantasy VII challenge running Discord server. I started it with a bunch of other like big names, especially for like the remake games. Like, I'll just think about any famous like Final Fantasy challenge runner, and they're probably in there or were there to help start it off to begin with. So what is this video about? I'm sure all of you are wondering. Well, don't worry, because I'm about to tell you, not too dissimilar fashion to how good old Charlie would. So, in typical Charlie fashion, I'm gonna tell the boys and girls to gather around the campfire and sing this campfire song. Simply put, the Gilgamesh situation is crazy. You see, the past few days, I have been embarking on basically an experiment. And I say that in the truest sense of the word. It was not just curiosity, it was to figure out just how far I could take this boss fight with just Cloud by himself. The journey this has been, honestly, has been building up for quite a long time. I'll say maybe 4 or 5 months ago at this point, I did my first ever Gilgamesh challenge on my channel. However, from there, it, like I mentioned before, quickly devolved into an obsession with doing this boss fight in particular to almost as close as I can get to perfection. Because of that, I have now imposed upon myself, last time I counted, 12 different restrictions to the Gilgamesh boss fight in particular. And if you ask me why, could not tell you. I just felt like it. The most recent restriction I imposed upon myself has been no buffs. And this is where I started to really get a sense of, okay, maybe we're reaching like the upper limits of what is possible with Cloud. And then I did some digging. You see, with the help of another very prominent name in the Final Fantasy VII challenge running community by the name of Doofus Shinra, I ended up finding out some stuff about how Gilgamesh specifically works, and I will go as far as say I ended up finding out some stuff that tells us just how the game truly works, if that makes sense. Sorry. You see, while I was trying to find a way to make the Ultima Gilgamesh Challenge Plus possible, try saying that 5 times fast, I ended up enlisting the help of Doofus to help me better understand how the Genji shield and just Gilgamesh's summoning patterns work. Because for a long time, I'll go as far as say most of the community, even like the higher brass of the community, had no idea how Gilgamesh worked in that regard. Especially when you get just a lot of conflicting information about how his weapon summoning works. Even from like the official like the FF7 Ultimania, there's information in that book that I now know probably is not accurate at all. Like the stuff Doofus gave me, I cannot do justice because of how thorough he was. So instead, I'm going to quickly show you a screenshot of what he sent to me, while also doing a read over of what he sent to me in real time to make it, easier for you more brain-rotted individuals in the audience. So yesterday, I was in a Discord call with Doofus as well as 2 other members of the community who go by the names of Kingdom Key JT and Juju the Holmes. And we were basically spitballing, trying to figure out what all the hoot and holler was about for what causes Gilgamesh to summon his weapons and when. And Doofus decided to do a little bit of experimenting and testing. From his findings, what he ended up figuring out is that Gilgamesh does not operate off of any kind of timer, really. Instead, he operates off of sequences and a certain number of actions in those individual sequences. The first of those sequences starts off with his first weapon, Naginata. Naginata needs to do 2 actions, one of which being an ability from the weapon itself, and then the following one needs to be from his stop. From there, he will jump backwards and then start the next sequence. Alright, boys and girls, here is a quick demonstration of what Doofus was referring to. So that is 1 attack, and that's 2. But I died, so I have to do that over again. Apologies. Once again, with this discovery, it does basically make Gilgamesh turn-based. So those were 2 actions he took, and that was the end of sequence 1. I'm presuming him walking up to you also counts as an action, because those were 2 attacks there. That's sequence 3 he's on right now. And because I parried him just then, he is now at the 1 sequence shorter for summoning Muramasa. And there we go, yeah, he did in 4 sequences. That's a very good example of what Doofus is talking about. The number of sequences that Naginata has to go through before he summons Muramasa organically is 5. Or in total, 10 actions before he can summon Naginata. From here on, I will not interject as much, as I will be reading more from Doofus's own words in general, so that way I do not, confuse what his original meanings were. I also just want to be as true to what he originally sent me as possible. So, going down the list, he says, after Muramasa summoned 3 actions from 2 abilities combinations, 1 from each sword, and 1 stop. From there we move on to the Rune Axe, which is 4 actions, Banana Fan 5, Excalibur 6, and Excalibur has 6 or sometimes 7, which I do believe I might have a theory as to why it possibly has 7, but there's nothing concrete, if I was to say. He also adds a note here that he doesn't always stomp after summoning additional weapons, but the most reliable way to mark the end of each sequence is when he jumps or moves away from you. So Gilgamesh does have a variety of dashes he can use, and most predominantly he jumps away from you. So that is what that means. The next part of this list talks about the number of sequences each weapon goes through before he summons the next Genji weapon. or the Genji Shield. So I already mentioned this briefly before, but I'll read over it again just to be thorough. Muramasa is summoned after 5 sequences or a total of 10 actions. Genji Shield is summoned after 7 sequences, 14 actions, 2 sequences, / 4 actions after Muramasa is summoned. Then he moves on to the Rune Axe, which is 10 actions, Banana Fan, which is 15. Next is the Genji Shield, once again after 17 sequences. 10 after the previous Genji Shield. And then he left one more thing here. There's 5 sequences in between each sword. So that is what the good President Doofus sent me. From there, I will show you some additional screenshots of basically follow-up questions I had, just clarifying certain things I was not sure about, but after my own personal testing, I can tell you with almost 100% certainty, I know without a shadow of a doubt how this fight works. But just so you know, we can follow the storyline and get the true lore dive on this. I'm just trying to cover all my bases. From there, I asked Doofus, do you know if the action count resets after each weapon, or does it add the number of actions needed based on the current weapon? And he says the latter. To clarify on this, I will basically... The best way I can think of explaining it is you are, during the fight, doing fractions. Yes, you remember that time all the way back in elementary school when the teacher was wagging their finger going, oh, one day you're gonna need this, little Jimmy. Sure enough, the old broad was right. Turns out I need fractions for this. The long and short of it is, let us just say hypothetically, Muramasa and all the weapons in general have 10 actions total before you need to move on to the next weapon, which once we get down into how the actual run works, that ends up being how it actually does work. Each weapon needs 10 actions, right, before it can move on to the next sequence. If you manage to knock out, for example, Naginata from Gilgamesh's hands in 8 actions, it will add the last 2 actions that Naginata had onto Muramasa before he can summon the next Genji weapon. So it'll take the count from 10 to 12. And if you get rid of Naginata in, say, 7 turns, right? Then it'll add the remaining number from Muramasa onto the Rune Axe. So it'll take the number from 10 to 15, for example. It is during this part of the story that Doofus ends up clarifying something extremely important to basically how the run is even possible, in theory, to begin with. He clarifies that also that testing was done with me dodging all of his attacks. If you perfect block Gilgamesh, he'll end the sequence early without doing a stomp or any follow-ups. I ask by how many actions, and he clarifies with just 1. He'll keep attacking with follow-up attacks whenever you dodge any of his attacks. If you perfect block each Naginata attack, Muramasa is summoned after 10 actions. The tough part is dealing with Rune Axe and later swords because of more unblockables that require dodging, and that can mess up your sequence / action math. That's why I tested by only dodging since it's his default math. I messed up that last part there, but that is basically this entire excerpt that we read over is what makes this possible even in theory. From my testing, I found out that you can get the fight. I do not want to get anyone excited when I say this, especially other members in the community who might be watching this, but after he clarified all that to me, right? And then after I did my own personal testing, I can almost say that at least the first half of Gilgamesh's fight is basically 100% scripted, outside of a few RNG instances. If everything goes right, if you parry everything perfectly, if you do the right amount of bravers, basically, if you play perfect. I would not even say that, but if you just play good, the fight is almost 100% scripted from beginning to end. Unfortunately, I do not think I'm anywhere near winning just yet, but it is still a path forward, a very, very, very bright path forward. And if it works out the way I think it will, I'm almost fairly certain I can figure out how to beat Gilgamesh without even having to touch the game. I could even just route right here, right now, a possible string of numbers, if you will, literally just doing math in order to figure out how many turns I can actually kill him in. Which leads me to the next topic. You see, upon figuring all this out with Gilgamesh thanks to Doofus's help, I ended up realizing that this basically turns the fight into a true turn-based game. Unironically. In a way, you're playing the original FF7 by just taking turns with him. Each number of actions Gilgamesh does actually at a certain point ends up having a set predetermined pattern of what he ends up doing. And you can predict it perfectly. Not even just predicted, you know for a fact what he's going to do on certain turns. For example, on some of my more optimal runs, I ended up discovering that the optimal amount of Bravers to do during his Naginata phase is 4. And optimally, you want to end the Naginata phase on the 8th action he takes. From here, he gets technically one additional action he can do with Naginata, which is the, or not Naginata, sorry. He gets one additional action he can do with Muramasa, which is the stomp he always does after you make him lose one of his weapons. One thing I would like to clarify about the Naginata phase is there is still some RNG elements. Depending on what attacks he does, it can go from a guarantee to not quite as guaranteed is the best way I can describe it. You see, from my experience, and this is something I brought up before in some of my older videos, I believe, if I remember, definitely during my streams. For the Naginata phase, you want Gilgamesh to do 2 attacks in specific, that being dual thrust and pinwheel. This gets the pressure gauge in a state where on that 8th attack, you are basically guaranteed to have him lose Naginata. Now, it is not impossible to get him to lose it, you know, depending on which attack he ends up not doing. But if you want to be absolutely sure that there is no way anything could backfire on you or anything could go wrong, you want him to ideally do those 2 attacks for true optimization. Another RNG thorn in the side that could appear and, you know, wriggle its ugly nose around the corner is Gilgamesh pose. Because of the nature of this attack and you literally have no choice but to dodge it, it can throw off the math. As mentioned before by Doofus, if you parry Gilgamesh, it basically sets him on an entire different track, if you will. Like, there's 2 possible tracks you can work off of when you fight him. If you dodge him primarily, then the first part of the list he gave me is the way the fight will go. Once again, 100% scripted. If you parry him, the entire paradigm of the fight changes. So it's like he adapts to what you're doing, and it actually causes him to summon like most of his Genji weapons much faster, and also just causes him to summon the Genji shield much faster. So if he were to dodge, or make you dodge, I should say, the Gilgamesh pose, it does throw your math off. I will be honest, I'm not sure by how much, because I had very good attempts in the past where he has done Gilgamesh pose, but everything else went right, and I still made him lose Naginata around the 8th turn or so. There have been times where I made him lose it on the 9th turn, but like I said, it does throw off your math, but not by much. Not to where I would say it really means anything. But if you want like a guarantee that you can get to certain parts of the fight while simultaneously dealing with later parts of the fight much easier, like I said, the reason why I say it's optimal, or not like I said, sorry, I left this part out. My reasoning for saying that the 8th, you want to make him lose Naginata on the 8th action he takes is because it makes Muramasa have to end up taking 12 actions before you can summon the Rune Axe. Other things to note that are really important for the run is you want his pressure gauge to be at a very specific spot. The best way I've been able to describe it to the past to a lot of my other challenge running friends is you want the pressure bar to be lined up with the back of the D in pressured at the very end. That is the more optimal spot for him if you want to guarantee you get the stagger to prevent him from summoning the Genji shield, which, like I mentioned before, it always pops up depending on how you count it on the 14th or 15th turn. Another thing that is important to note that I forgot to mention is that it does not matter when you do the Bravers as long as you get 4 Bravers in. So by the time the 8th turn rolls around, you can either parry him once and it knocks Naginata out of his hand, or the Braver itself, the last Braver, knocks it out of his hand. Those are also very important things to keep in mind for the first part of the fight.
Alright, boys and girls, I'm going to the best of my ability, show you what I'm referring to. That is action 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the second Braver, 5, 6, 7. That's the 8th action, and he just lost Naginata. And that is what the first half of the fight looks like if you do everything optimally.
Now it is time to go over arguably the most important part of the fight, which is the Muramasa phase, aka the first Genji shield cancel. So after you make him lose Naginata, he'll do one stomp, which technically counts as an extra turn because he really does not do much during this, and outside of, you memorizing the total action count he does, it's not really that important. Once he jumps back after you parry him, I recommend doing one focus thrust and then use Cloud's chase attack, which is it's usually something every character has. Either they hold the button for it or they just press it once and they go flying after the enemy. But you chase after Gilgamesh with this attack specifically because it just makes it a lot more smoother in the long run. And then you continue to hold the square button and it causes Cloud to do a spin attack. And it puts the pressure gauge at just about the perfect spot it needs to be in order to set up for the Genji shield cancel. Another thing I should mention for this is you do not absolutely do not want to be in Prime or Punisher mode. The optimal mode for this part of the fight is Operator mode because it allows you to basically time when you stagger him a lot easier. From there, the cycle you do during each phase is, or not each phase, after each parry you do for him, right? You attack him once, right? And you hold square. And then you just wait for him to attack you again. You do this for 4 additional turns, right? After he summons Muramasa. And on that, once again, depending how you count it, the 14th or 15th action he does, he's about to summon the Genji shield. From there, you just do your best to stagger him, depending on how close or how far off you are from that last stagger hit, which cancels him out of the Genji shield. Now, here is where things get kind of jank. You see, something that me and Doofus, I'll say primarily him because I guess he was more aware of it than I was utilizing it without realizing a long while back. But since I've spoken with him, both of us were basically using a glitch. But now that I know how this fight operates better, I'm not sure if I should really even call it that. If you make Gilgamesh get knocked out of summoning the Genji shield without using limits or fire materia, or just any really strong attack period, it puts him into this weird glitch state, if you would, where he does nothing but stomp attacks. And this effect lasts a pretty healthy amount of time. I'll go as far as say it lasts up until the very end of the Rune Axe phase. Depending on, what variation of this challenge you're doing, it could last until even the phase transition into phase 2. Like I said, I'm not sure what causes him to do this. I have some theories. I might tell you what they are at the end, but in the long run, they really do not matter. All you need to know is it primarily forces him to stomp for whatever reason. Do not know if that's his form of throwing a tantrum because we took away his precious shield, or if his AI is trying to make up for a number of actions to advance to the next Genji shield phase. I have no idea. Now is when we get to the end of the Muramasa phase and the start of the Rune Axe phase. So after you stagger him, if you do everything optimally, you will not have to use any focus thrust to build up, the pressure gauge, because you will literally be in direct control of when to trigger it. You will have 2 ATB going into the stagger phase. From there, you can do 2 Bravers, and you will have just enough time to build up 1 more additional Braver, or ATB gauge, to do that last Braver.
Alright, here I am at the Muramasa phase in question. I have his pressure gauge perfectly lined up, so now I just have to mess up. There are times where you might have to do some extra ones just to be sure. That's the 14th action. No, this is 14th. And that would be the 15th.
Let's finish this. No more running.
And Cloud rolled low on those final 2 Bravers. But that is what phase 2 looks like.
From here is when he will wake back up, basically. And from my experience, optimally, I think I'd have to do more testing. If after, I record all this and I go back and do a little bit more practice and start editing everything down, I will definitely have a number for you. I believe you can make Gilgamesh lose Muramasa in 2 attacks or 2 actions that he does after he gets out of the stagger. In one of my most recent runs, I made him lose it on the 18th action he took, which would have placed the amount of actions that he would have had to have done with the rune axe to summon Banana Fan around 15 to 16 actions, I believe. Could be lower. I'll throw whatever numbers up on the screen as I'm talking, right? Optimally, I think, like I said, I had to do more testing. I'll definitely have an answer for you after. But I think you can make Gilgamesh lose Muramasa in 2 actions after the stagger, which optimally would make it to where Rune Axe would have to go through 15 actions before he summons the Banana Fan. And that is no small number of actions. That is a large gap for Gilgamesh, and that puts you well ahead of him in terms of where you would want to be for the fight in totality.
Alright, editing unknown here with the numbers, like I said. I will be honest, I'm not sure. Sorry, just had to make sure that setting was off. Because of something that happened in this fight, I'm not sure how accurate the numbers are. But basically, this is the last attempt I did. We're currently at the 15th action count if you count the Genji Shield as his own action. Here would be the 16th. And that is the 17th. And here he tries to do the Gilgamesh pose, which is why the math is skewed, if you ask me, because I'm not sure if it still counted the action. But basically, I believe that the optimal number from a lot of past attempts and just from this most recent attempt, I believe the optimal number to make Gilgamesh lose Muramasa is 7. Lucky number 7, huh? Funny is that? But that's just what I believe. From a lot of my tests and from my findings, I believe the optimal number to make him lose not Genji Shield up, but Muramasa is 7. I'm not sure if that Gilgamesh pose counted. I probably have to ask Doofus about this after he watches this video. But I believe 7 is the optimal number you want to make him lose the Genji Shield on. So for now, I'm just going to pretend like that Gilgamesh pose did not count. But another thing is, if that is the case, that means the Rune Axe now has a total of 15 actions it has to go through before he can try to summon the Banana Fan organically. From here, he jumps away. That is the first action with it, and that would be action 18. 19. 20. 21. 22. And I staggered him in 5 actions. From here, this is a very suboptimal damage phase I did because I just did not have the ATB and I was not patient. I should have waited for him to do whatever. But here is... I've lost count already, but I made him lose it in just about the same number of actions as I did Muramasa. This is huge for a number of reasons, because if this is right, if I did the math correctly, I made him lose it in 7 actions. He would have had 15 actions to go through before summoning Banana Fan. The number you get for Banana Fan, if I did the math right, Banana Fan I think would have had to have gone through... Hold on, give me a minute. I do have a headache like at the time of recording, so doing this math is even harder. I think that is a total of around 18 actions he would have had to have gone through for Banana Fan before he could try summoning Excalibur organically. And I do not need to explain why that is an absolutely nutty number to have to go through before either he tries summoning Excalibur or the Genji Shield. That is a monumental number, and if it works the way I think it does, 7 is also the optimal number that you would want to make him lose the Rune Axe in. But yeah, that is if I have my math right, that is if I calculated everything correctly, that is if I understand the fight correctly, that is if everything goes theoretically perfectly, that is if the Rune Axe that I just showed you is the optimal Rune Axe possible that you would want for this fight. Alright, this is editing unknown here. I will be taking it from here on out because a lot of the footage I recorded previously for this video is now obsolete because of my recent findings. This part of the video, I'm basically going to be asking the help of a lot of members of the community for help, most predominantly Doofus. I would like your assistance in figuring out how Gilgamesh's, second phase works, whether it be Swordsman Supreme or anything like that. I would really appreciate it. Someone else I would also probably ask for help in is Phantasm. For those of you who do not know who Phantasm is, he is, I would go as far as say, a cornerstone for the community. A lot of what we understand, a lot of what we use for challenge runs in this game, we got directly from him. He's basically a data miner for the game. Not a long while back, but not long ago, he did like a massive file dump, if you would. I forget the specific name for it, but it basically was all of like the stats and statistics and like hard numbers for how certain things in the game worked. And that made certain challenges for a lot of the player base very much so possible, when in the past they would have been pipe dreams. So I'm probably going to ask his help in terms of figuring out why what we see in the Ultimania is so different from what we see in the game, as well as just what the files themselves tell us about how Gilgamesh works, why they're so different from what we're seeing like play and happen on screen. One other person I would like to bring up is he does not upload. Well, he started uploading more recently, as I understand it. A player by the name of Patrick M. I watched one of his more recent challenges, which was a Gilgamesh challenge. He did Gilgamesh, basically minimal level run. It was level 53, no materia, which is really impressive. I'll probably do a reaction video on it later to give him some more direct pointers. But yeah, I'm probably going to, at the very least, talk to him about this, because I believe he asked me more directly about specifics for how Gilgamesh worked, and I'm sure he will definitely love this video. I'm sure there's a lot more people that I can think of, but I'll probably message them in DMs and stuff, see where they stand, how they can help, if they can help, so on and so forth. But that is basically where I am at with this challenge. The one last thing I would like to add before closing out is to any of the other challenge runners watching this video, I recommend you start counting the actions and stuff of whatever your favorite boss is right now, whatever your favorite challenge is, whatever you're doing right now, start counting the actions of whatever it is you're fighting, because with this discovery, I think me and Doofus unironically figure it out in totality how the game works, like truly how it works from beginning to end, inside and out, and how in a lot of ways it's more like a turn-based game than any of us thought. I really would recommend sharing it to other challenge runners you might know, to just anyone who you think might be interested. Just spread the word as far as you can about this, because this is a major discovery. And for some reason, I have the feeling it is not specifically just tied to Gilgamesh by himself. There has to be like one or two other bosses that operate similarly to how Gilgamesh in that vein works. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Remember to always stay anonymous.